Um, well, we are also recording this presentation so that we have a variety of ways for people to participate. So for those who made it in person, we appreciate you making the time and feeling comfortable to be here. And also appreciate your patience as we manage logistics that allow people who are not here to either tune in remotely tonight or watch this video when we're done. My name is Kate Morse, and I am the program director for the Copper River Watershed Project, and I'm here with Ewan from Dow. And just a brief little background on why the Watershed Project is, oh, I have the thing to click through.
Also done.
Point at what thing do I need to be pointing at? With the arrows is what I'm doing. Is it upside down? Why don't you just do it for me? So you can keep going. So the Copper River Watershed Project, we're a nonprofit in the community that is working to promote a salmon-rich, intact watershed and culturally diverse communities. And we do that through partnerships. And this project is a very good example of we are just one partner working with a variety of organizations with a range of resources and expertise. And we'll call those partners out later. But if we go to the next slide. So we're located in Cordova, but we work with landowners and resource managers throughout this whole drainage area. And we do a variety of habitat restoration, prioritization, and education programs. And the particular project we're talking about tonight is centered here in Cordova and is within the Eyak Lake watershed, and that is the Weir. And we'll just keep carrying forward. Our goal for tonight is to give you a brief update on the history that we've been able to piece together about, Lisa, you can go one more, about the history of the Weir, see what maybe gaps people in the community can help to fill in. And then Ewan is going to talk about some options that we can consider based on some preliminary investigations that we've been able to hire Dow to help with looking at the site. But really, we want to make sure that we're hearing from the community who uses and lives near upstream or downstream of this structure, and both use that to inform the future vision and make sure that we understand the complete story about this site. So again, thanks to everyone who's tuning in either tonight or afterwards. So just to make sure everyone understands where we are in this process, we're at the very beginning of this timeline. We were able to work with Dow to get a complete site survey. So we've had surveyors in town. We've been working on a hydraulics and hydrology report that analyzes the water that flows through Eyak watershed and helps to determine how different structures can influence what the water's doing as it passes through the watershed. And then they're helping with some alternatives that we can consider for what we do at this site. And with all the information that we're collecting from these investigations, we want to match that with community input. And then we're using all of that to resubmit an application to the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council at the beginning of August. And it is likely to be an expensive project. And so that proposal opportunity provides the best chance in our foreseeable future to get some significant funding to be able to bring some upgrades or improvements to this site to fruition. But that's just getting the funding. And then when we get the funding, then we start a complete design process. And so there's still going to be a lot of opportunities to be having conversations and fine tuning the vision and the design for the site. And then ultimately go to construction, which at the pace that we're going wouldn't the earliest would likely be in 2023. That's like actual work would happen on the ground. So in order to get something that the community likes and that the partners that would be responsible for overseeing the construction and the maintenance are on board with, takes a long time. And I just say that because if we were to have a failure, you don't really have that kind of time to put into the design process. So I just want to call that out, that this is the path that we're choosing, in hopes that we have that time to build in the local expertise and input and come up with a vision that meets multiple goals, rather than have a rush job that has to do something in case of a catastrophic failure. So we'll move on to the next slide. I'm excited. I had a chance to do a little bit of investigative journalism and work with the Cordova Times and go through. I knew that the Weir was constructed in 1972. And the very first edition of the Cordova Times in 72, January 6th, the letter from the city manager was all about a community workshop hosted by the state to talk about the dropping lake levels in Eyak Lake and concerns over the exposure of the nearshore spawning habitats that would result from that. And everybody at that meeting was in favor of a Weir. And so I'm hopeful that, almost 50 years later, Cordovans are still able to be supportive of this idea. But it was something that was, vetted by the community initially. So the earthquake that happened in '64 is what motivated this community workshop, because this area was uplifted as a result of the earthquake, and then the lake levels dropped as a result of that uplift. So the contract was awarded by a department within the state of Alaska that no longer exists. And there's been a very big challenge to find any paper trail to understand who owns the Weir, who built it, whose responsibility it is to maintain it. And so for the last 49 years, nothing has happened. There's been a couple attempts by DOT to maintain it. And I've talked with Jack Stevenson because it was during his tenure with DOT locally. And because of the challenges around ownership and access and permissions, they were never able to follow through with any actual maintenance. So with that, we are, like I mentioned earlier, interested in addressing the Weir before it were to fail, because that gives us, if we control the timeline rather than are trying to respond to an emergency, then we can ideally end up with an outcome that is more preferable to all entities in the end. And the large driving factor by the partnership is to improve fish passage above and below the Weir, in addition to maintaining the lake levels. And I just want to emphasize, for those of you not as familiar with the salmon life cycle, that which many people here are, but juvenile salmon, they, especially coho and sockeye, will live in fresh water for 2, 3, 4 years before they migrate out to the ocean. And so during that time period, they might need to move to new habitat for better food, for better protection, to avoid localized conditions that might not be ideal. And so by limiting that movement of fish between the lake and the river habitat, in which that river habitat leads to lots of other delta habitats, you can limit the productivity of your fish produced in that system. So we are interested in maintaining the lake levels at the rate that they are now, for the original reason that the Weir was built, so that the spawning habitat stays submerged. But we also want to build upon that original design and improve the fish passage, because that was not something that was a core part of that original design. So I just want to emphasize that there are many impacts to this lake. We're calling it Cordova's multi-million-dollar lake now, because the ex-vessel value of the commercial fish from Eyak Lake is estimated to be almost $2 to $3 million, estimates by Fish and Game. And so anything that we can do to maximize the productivity of the system, be it maintaining lake levels to keep spawning grounds underwater, to improving movement of the juvenile fish species above and below the Weir, is going to help species of fish that are important for their intrinsic value, but also for their consumptive value and the commercial value here in Cordova. So I've mentioned a few times, lower lake levels would expose the nearshore spawning habitat, and that's what this map on the right is demonstrating, it's not very clear in this color schematic, but that all of the near shore dark pink areas are sockeye spawning habitat, and they're all right along the edge of the lake. There would be changes to property lines if the water level were to decrease, which could get complicated. And the Eyak Lake is an emergency drinking water source. And so changing lake levels could change the availability or the ability to treat that lake water. And then there's some safety considerations for anglers and boaters that are using or passing over the site. So I mentioned that there's a lot of partners involved, and these partners are involved because they have a stake or an interest in fish passage. They have land that's near the site. They have a right-of-way or a highway bridge immediately downstream of the site. So there's a lot of people that have a stake in the game in addition to the community members of Cordova. And so I just want to emphasize this because as much as we'd like to make the decision for what we want, there's other players that have a stake in the game and are going to be responsible for overseeing both the construction and the ongoing maintenance, who are going to digest the same community feedback that we are in the design process. And the next slide just emphasizes that there's a lot of complexities around ownership as far as who owns what land. There's easements, there's right-of-ways, there's navigable waters that DNR claims. And so that's kind of been the layering of issues that have made maintenance in the past very challenging. And so as a result of this process, we are working to lay a clear paper trail and have a forward plan for who is responsible so that we don't wait another 49 years to respond to something that's not working that well. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ewan, and I'll let you try the AOC technology.
Now that's what you call too efficient. There we go. Let's give it one. No. Oh, it's jammed. There you go. So let's give that a try. Excellent. Okay. So who am I and what do I need from you? I am Ewan. I'm the lead investigator and designer for Dowell, and that's the engineering company that Copper River Watershed Project has involved to help with this project. What I'll do tonight is show you where we are in the project and what the feasible alternatives are. By all means, this is not the end list. We are very much open to comment and investigating what essentially what will service the needs of the community. And just to echo that, I am here to listen to you. I'm not here to sell anything, essentially. I'm interested to find out how you use the area, what your memories of the Weir are, and what your likes and concerns are. And there is no question too simple to ask. What I'm here to do is to make sure that you come away with an understanding of the process and what we're trying to do. So with that, I will go into the presentation. Based on what we've seen in the field, Kate had mentioned that we were out in early June to do our site investigations and come up with our H&H report, which is the hydrologic and hydraulics report. Based on what we've seen, there were three main needs identified for this project. We have a healthy fish habitat, safety concerns, and then a threat, failure, or malfunction of the Weir. Now, for the healthy fish habitat, the boat slot provides a low flow notch for fish, but as Kate has mentioned, it wasn't specifically designed for fish passage. We want to make that a lot better to make sure that the salmon have a way to get into the lake. Also, maintaining existing water levels in the lake to protect existing spawning areas, as well as the drinking source that Kate mentioned. There's two safety concerns that I identified while I was out there. There was the submerged hydraulic jump right beside the Weir, and this is where a current of water flows back over on itself, meaning recreational users or debris can get caught in that area. And I'll have a picture in the next slide just to illustrate that. As well as the pier, anyone who has been out recreational fishing or used the boat slot recently will notice that the weir is not in great shape, so we'd be keen to sort that out as well. Now, for threat of failure or malfunction, as you know, there are several deformations in the weir, most noticeably the 5-foot bulge right beside the boat slot, as well as some joints starting to pop or starting to separate at the top of the weir. We are quite happy that there's no imminent risk of failure associated with the weir. However, it's its 50th anniversary, so to speak, coming up next year, and most structures are designed for a 50-year design life. So it's good that we're starting to think ahead and keep this in mind going forward, just to make sure that we are keeping the health of the fish and the lake levels front of mind. So this is what I was talking about with the hydraulic safety issues. This is what we called a rolling hydraulic, and you can see this is at the weir. This was taken when we were out in sight back in early June, and I just wanted to show what I meant when someone could get trapped in this hydraulic. The flow falls over the weir in a jet of water and then rolls back in itself, meaning items and potentially some recreational users could get trapped. It's just something to be aware of as you're out there. So, based on our 3 identified needs, we came up with our project goals from an engineering perspective, and this very closely mimics what Kate was saying. We want to make sure that the design life of the structure is there, as well as having a reliable structure. We want to improve the environment for fish spawning or fish passage, improve public safety, like we just mentioned, maintain existing water surface elevations at the lake, as well as the discharge going forward into Eyak River, reduce the potential maintenance and operational costs for the new structure or proposed structure, as well as maintaining boat passage to at least the same level as that currently exists. So just now I'll walk through 4 alternatives. I will show some images of similar constructed projects that have been done before, as well as the description, and then I'll show an image of, or an aerial image, like the one on the left-hand side, with some commentary to make sure that we can identify the design. So with alternative 1, that's primarily for us to compare the alternatives, but I'd also like you to take this opportunity to kind of comment on what your likes and dislikes about the Weir are and how you use it. So when you have an opportunity to talk about what you like about it, this is the alternative to comment on. Now, for alternative 2, this looks at the rehabilitation of the existing structure. So we want to look at improving what is there and then reinforcing it, as well as adding the potential for better fish passage and boat passage. We've got a project here down in Idaho where we see an existing low-head dam, very similar to the Eyak Weir, after improvement works. And this is a natural-looking fish passage. So the points I'd like to point out here are: we'd want to fix the bulge section of the sheet pile, repair and reinforce the boat slot using rock to buttress the sheet pile above the ground. We'll make sure that scour isn't an issue by including an appropriate amount of rock to mitigate that. And we will try and make sure that bollards or another structures in place to avoid large woody debris or ice from knocking out the fishway. On an aerial, this is the general location of things. So we'd have the rock pool and riffle fish passage on the river right. And when I say river right, I'm looking downstream, essentially right beside the highway there. And then we have the fixing of the bulge. Going on to alternative 3, this is replacing with a new sheet pile structure. And rather than removing the old sheet pile structure, we'll put the new sheet pile structure immediately in front or within 5 feet of the existing structure. This saves in costs for removing that existing structure. This allows us to design a sheet pile structure that's up to code and safe, but also allows us to create a compound structure. So we see here that there's a fill between the 2 sheet piles. We'd want to compact that and make this one homogeneous structure to make it more resilient. In this alternative, we would look at placing the boat slot closer to shore, so closer to the highway, and then have the fish passage closer to the existing boat slot. And this has the same opportunity to put a series of bollards or another structure to deflect debris away from the fish passage. So as I was saying, we've got the boat slot closer to the road, the rock and riffle natural fish passage closer to where the old boat slot was, and we're fixing them into the existing structure with a new sheet pile weir immediately in front of the old one. An alternative 4, we are going to propose reinforcing the existing sheet pile weir with rock, both upstream and downstream, making it more of an embankment, and placing multiple rock weirs downstream of the weir to decrease that hydraulic gradient and make it more friendly for fish passage. This has the benefit of decreasing energy dissipation or increasing energy dissipation and reducing the velocities downstream of the weir. And it helps with removing those safety concerns of the rolling hydraulic. It does, however, have an increased complexity of navigating for watercraft. As you'd imagine, a lot of rocks in the river is not what you'd want when you're taking your boat up and over the weir. Now, just to sum it up, and here's the aerial image. So we'd have rock up and upstream and downstream of the weir with a fish passage structure there with additional rock weirs. And we don't necessarily know the amount of rock weirs or the spacing of them just yet. We will have to wait until the design phase to know exactly where they'll be placed. But this just gives an indication of what that would look like in an aerial image. So this is my very simplified alternative comparison. So alternative 1, as you can see, is not great for fish passage. It's never really been designed for fish passage, the existing weir. For boat access, we're saying it's not great because it's at the bulge section, it's at an angle and you're more likely to scrape the underside of your boat, as well as the weir not being amazingly safe. The pier not being amazingly safe for using the boat slot. Maintenance cost, I'm going to say, is going to be very high in the next couple of years, because if we do nothing for it and plan ahead, then it's going to be an increased amount cost if something reactionary needs to happen rather than being proactive about it. And cost, I'm talking construction cost here. While it will be cheaper to do nothing at just now, the maintenance costs that are reactionary will be a lot more in the future. You'll see for fish passage, alternative 1 through 4 will be a market increase for fish passage, because we can design to maximize that no matter what alternative it is. It's a matter of location of the fish passage between the alternatives. For boat access, as I mentioned, alternative 4 will not be as great as alternative 2 and 3, but we are aiming to at least improve the boat access between alternative 2 and 3. And with maintenance, anything that's proposed will be designed to modern standards, as well as be protected with more rock to prevent any strikes by debris and ice. And as you'd imagine, the costs of these are fairly large. 1 and 2 are 2 and 3 are fairly similar in cost. However, just due to the sheer amount of rock that would involve spanning from bank to bank for multiple weirs, there will be an additional cost for that. And with that, I will hand back over to Kate for any closing comments.
So I don't have any closing comments. I guess now is when we like to open the floor. I don't know if anyone else tuned in or if it's just Micah that is on. Can you expand so we can see? But we would be interested to hear any questions that you might have on any of the alternatives that you heard, or comments for or against certain concepts. If you don't like to verbalize those things, there's comment sheets over there that you can also use. For those of you that are tuning in from home, on that project website, there is a downloadable copy of the comment sheet that is basically an aerial photo. So you can either write or draw on it, as well as write in the margins, and you can submit that to us. On that website is also still the community survey that we have open. And we haven't been able to, we've been spending a lot more time figuring out the safest way to conduct this meeting. And so couldn't dive as far into the survey results before we gathered tonight. But in the gist that I've seen, when I've checked in with the survey, we've had 69 people that have responded, which is great to get such broad feedback. A combination of people who live on the lake and river and those who don't live on the lake and river. It was great to get a lot of feedback about the boat use at this site, because that's not something that the Watershed Project or the Forest Service partners in town were personally familiar with. And so it's evident that it is a very used and desired feature. All people who responded were very much in support of improving fish passage and maintaining lake levels. And there's certainly been concern over making sure that lake levels are not increased and that private property is reduced. And that is definitely not something that we aim to do. We're looking at the lake levels that are maintained today by the Weir and sticking with that as the level that we'll aim to keep, not changing it from what the average height is today. So with that, if you're not comfortable coming up, this microphone is sanitized, and it would be helpful if you'd speak right into the mic so that our recording on the computer would hear you, and people who are tuning in from home can hear you. If you'd rather speak from your seat, then I'm going to try to restate what you ask so that it makes it onto the recording and people who aren't here can hear. So anyone? Yes, sir, in the back. Come on down. Just do a little test. It should be. You have to kind of
Okay, is this thing working?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, first I just want to say.
You got to stay close though.
Take this off, you think?
It worked when you leaned in and then you.
There we go. How about that?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So this is Stormy Hot, U.S. Forest Service here. I just wanted to make a few probably fairly broad ranging comments, just having been a little bit a part of this discussion with Kate and Ewan over the past couple of weeks. First, I just want to say thanks. I think there's been a lot of work go into this presentation. It's kind of unfortunate that it's timed with obviously what's going on here with COVID and whatnot. And so I think normally you would probably have some more attendance here. I do think that Eyak Lake is very important to Cordova. And from a fish biologist standpoint, it's a super interesting lake. It's very productive for both sockeye and coho. Has one of the latest timed coho runs. Go up Power Creek and Hatchery Creek around. It's incredible to be able to go up there in December and see spawning. Coho, this is not a normal thing for Alaska, so it's really incredible. In addition to that, there's multiple separated sockeye stocks that return to places like Middle Arm. We have very distinct early and late runs. And so just truly, a very diverse, productive salmon habitat. And so it's good to see, some attention on here. When I look at that structure as a fish biologist, obviously with the returns we get there, it doesn't seem to be a problem at all with adult salmon passage. Salmon or adult returning salmon are very strong fish and can get up that thing no problem. But I think really the issue is, and I just say this just because, if maybe I know there's not a lot of people here, but some people might say, what's the problem? The adult fish get up there, very easily, and we see them in the lake. But I do think a lot of times it is likely a velocity barrier to juvenile coho and sockeye salmon moving back between the Eyak River habitat and the lake habitat, which could be pretty important for those rearing fish. And so I think it is something worth improving. So just wanted to say, thanks for looking at it. And I do have a question, I guess. I haven't really reviewed too much the results of the survey, and you talked a little bit about risk and risk of failure. Certainly walking out there, anecdotally, you can look at that structure. It's clearly getting old. It's bent and rusted, and there's water shooting through cracks and stuff. But I am, I don't know, Ewan, what you could say about, if you could expand any more on that risk idea of, what are the potential issues there? What could happen? If the first alternative there, number one, is it likely to stay there for another 50 years if we just leave it alone? More specifically, I guess, were there any specific aspects of that structure that seemed to be high risk, the sheet pile separating or rusting through, or can you say anything about that? So I'll end my comments there and listen to you. Thanks.
Sure, thanks, Stormy. Just so I can qualify this answer, I'm a water resources engineer rather than a structural engineer. However, based on what I've seen out there, I would not estimate it. Put it this way, I wouldn't like to see it in 50 years' time. I don't think it would last too long, or as long as another 50 years. With regards to the risks, let me say this. With regards to flooding downstream, there wouldn't be a huge impact or a really severe impact downstream. And this is based on the 2012 DNR report that declassified the Weir from a dam to just a regular Weir structure. So their observations indicated that the failure of a structure during a really heavy storm event wouldn't be catastrophic downstream. What it would mean in terms of lake levels dropping would it would have a fairly big impact on the spawning habitat and other users of the lake. I think there's a floodplain base there as well. So I won't speak on the structure because I'm not a structural engineer, but based on what I've seen out there, it's another 50 years won't be good for this structure.
And I think too, the lake level is lowering, as it continues to bulge, you're losing some of that level behind. And so it could be also a slow creep of, whether it's exposing spawning grounds or expanding private property, like battles between state and private owners. I don't know, but there's also, not just the sudden consequences, but the slow bleed to outcomes. Yes.
Oh, I get a perfect clean line.
You will.
Wow. Should I clean my own? Oh, hi, my name's Dave Zastra. I also work for the Forest Service. I'm the Recreation Program Manager. I'm also part of the City Trails Parks and Rec as a commissioner and part of the City Trails Committee as the chair. So multiple hats as we all wear. Thank you as well for the watershed taking this on and coordinating this community effort and obviously all the other partners that are involved. So I'm glad to see something happening after I've spent 30 years living in Cordova and watched it slowly deteriorate over time. It's certainly time for somebody to take charge and see what we can do to repair this. So clearly the water level and the fish passage, water levels and drinking water for the community, fish passage for all the fish, that's hugely important. But also clearly it's a recreation spot as well. And I appreciate how you guys framed this as a public safety. Folks going out to use the Weir. I've used it in years past, and years ago when I used it, it felt pretty hinky for me as well. And I know it's only gotten worse. So I guess I just wanted to say, obviously, it's going to be continued to be used as a recreation location for anglers wanting to fish. And my question is, have you guys thought about and considered, I guess, two things? Access onto the Weir for people that want to fish. That's complicated now the way it's designed. But then also access onto the site. People access that Weir from both the highway town side of the bridge and the other side of the bridge. As we know, there's a little driveway off on the other side of the bridge to get over to the lake shore and to the Weir. And then people just jumping over the railing from that large pullout that's used also for the Eyak River trailhead access as well. So any thoughts on that? It's kind of auxiliary stuff. I know the primary concern certainly is lake levels, drinking water, fish passage, but all that definitely flows into the whole need for recreation.
Sure.
Yes, it is part of the equation, and it could be a little complicated because the outcome of the Weir, like whatever, I don't know what comes first, the idea for the design and then like modification of access on the site itself, on the Weir itself, but there also might potentially come some proposals for regulation change if because of there's really restricted special regulations there. And so that could be impacted by changes to how the fish are moving through, but that won't be able to be determined until there's a plan in place. We do have a history of working with the state of Alaska's recreational access program, Shelter Cove. They came through big for those stairs. And so I built on that relationship and I'm in discussions about this particular project because like you mentioned, it's not just the Weir itself, but the safety from the highway down to the site there's access and private land issues and then safety, people where they park, they have to walk across the bridge to get to the less steep side to get down there. And so it is part of the dialogue. Those resources might not be applicable to the funding source that we're going to with the trustee council in particular, because they're focused on habitat restoration. But the state does have recreational access funding to put towards projects like this and recognize this as a very important recreational site. So we will continue to work on those relationships and discussions to see what makes sense and what's feasible and affordable. And then all of that, like the road access is all within DOT's right of way. Walking across the bridge and the start of the trail on the Delta side of the bridge is DOT right of way, but then it gets into corporation land and a little bit of Forest Service easement over corporation land. So again, the complexities of allowing and getting approval for all of that access are very challenging as well, but part of the conversation and something that is safety, whether it's people fishing or boating through, will definitely be a part of how the designs and concepts are analyzed or evaluated. So thanks for that comment.
Yeah, I can add something from the engineering side of things. For me, I'm looking at the structure and what will maintain that structural integrity. With regards to having people on the weir, it comes into kind of safety again, or if there's a risk of debris or ice removing a structure and then impacting the weir. That's how we think the bulge got there initially. It looks like there was a welded post on the other side of the boat slot to guide boats through based on the original drawings. And it looks like either ice or debris have caught that and pushed it forward and taken that pole off, creating that bulge. So any access or any other features that would be included in the weir, it would be analysed for that, making sure that whatever we put up there doesn't impact the integrity of the weir.
Does anybody that's virtually participating have any questions or comments? And currently everybody is muted, so if anybody is sharing a question or comment, we're not hearing you. Are there any comments from folks in the room?
I got a question. Chris Bullen here. I've lived here for 23 years. I just want to thank the watershed also for this. It's same as Dave there. I've watched it slowly deteriorate over the years. I've been a pretty, I don't know, maybe if you call it a heavy user, but I've used everything from a little prop skiff to ski boats to airboats and my current jet boat. I was up there on Saturday actually and spent quite a bit of time playing around at the weir there, just kind of checking it out and stuff. The pictures here, is this a recent picture?
Yes, that's from the 6th of June this year.
Okay, so in the years past, and this may have changed over this last year, but more towards, I want to say that little green corner there on the highway. There used to be a gravel bar that shot straight across there that blocked almost all the way to the boat slot. It kind of stuck out there where you'd almost have to come under the bridge and kind of take a right and then go over the river bar, the gravel bar at lower water. And then circle back to your left and kind of line up to go over the boat slot. And so my concern with alternative number 3 there, you talk about placing the boat slot on the left-hand side there towards the highway. Is there ample depth to be able to do that, or is that something that would have to be made to do that?
Thanks for your question. This is exactly the feedback we need. For the depth on that side of the weir, yes, it probably would need to be made a bit deeper. And the reason that the channel or the gravel bars moved is a function of the type of scour that's occurring at the weir. So with the redesign of the weir, that scour shape will change, and we can predict that to some extent. But we would need to be very wary of that if we're putting the boat slot on that side. Just as you said, we don't want to make sure you take it at the bottom of your boat while you're going over.
Right. Yeah, and that was kind of the alternative number 3. I think it's great that we're going to fix or and help improve the fish passage, just because we're seeing more and more anglers down the river, so it affects the run as well. And I love seeing the fish up Power Creek in the winter. It's just simply amazing. My other concern was with the boat slot on the left there. If, it might affect that little green corner there with water flow coming out. I know, like you said, that you could protect the slot, that was just a concern of mine as well. But something that I noticed on Saturday was that And I've noticed this more and more at the Weir over the last few years. Is the Elodia, am I saying that right? Is really taken effect on that. It's a big factor when you're crossing with, prop boat, jet boat, anything other than an airboat is hugely affected with the Elodia, and it's very heavily, I guess, there on the left-hand side. So that's even when you cross the boat slot now, just right out in front of it, the Elodia is pretty heavily, and you have to really navigate and watch and pay attention to what you're doing. I myself have been in some situations there where, it was a possibility that I might actually come back against the Weir or over the Weir, not under power. So
Yeah. That's like,
it's just, the Elodia has really taken over down on that area over the years that I've noticed. And then, I mean, I don't have to tell you the disrepair of I guess you call it the pier there, the little landing. I also did notice that over the years, the ice flow, not that we have a big ice flow there, but in some years during breakup, it's more of the big sheets of ice coming down against that that has affected the sheet piling in front of it and has taken out a couple of extensions there on the walkway. There used to be, I think, 3 sections. I believe we're down to 1.5 now.
yes, thereabouts.
Yeah, and we had 2 last year. Someone had actually taken some boards and extended the 3rd one.
Yeah.
And then, you start looking at it, like we're talking safety of things. The metal walkways that were on there were zip tied down. It's that doesn't cut it. So it's really scary to think about what could happen. And then I also noticed that the second section has kind of lost its pilings and it's bent down in the water now. So that just happened over this last year, probably, I'm guessing this winter with the ice flow and stuff. I think it was 2 years ago, there's on the 3rd extension, there used to be some pipe that would stick out from that little pier, and crossing on the boat slot, it was a navigational hazard. I actually hooked onto it with my boat and pulled it up away from there and drifted down against the Weir on the left-hand side there where there was no water flow, and just kind of left it and dropped it there just to move that, hazard. And then also on the right-hand side of the boat passage there where it's failed and bulged out, there's a sharp 90-degree sheet piling corner that I know several people have hit. I myself hit it in my airboat crossing that big bulge there. When in lower water, in an airboat, you can cross in just about anything. But the big bulge of water will also throw you around a little bit, so you kind of be on your toes. You're not wanting to hit the piling. You're not wanting to hit the sharp 90-degree corner on the other side. So I did end up putting a 4-foot gouge in the side of my airboat. Immediately turned around and went back to the boat landing. But there's been other people stuck on there, hit it. I talked to Peterson Welding, and they said that that corner is really good for business for them in the summer. So yeah, I just had those questions and comments. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else? case someone on their computer is frantically looking for the unmute button, I'll say in the meantime that obviously this was not the ideal time that everyone feels comfortable coming to a workshop. So you can let people know if they missed it, that they can contact the Watershed Project, and we will be able to share a copy of this presentation so that they can hear what you heard and see the pictures about the different concepts. And Ewan will also be in town this week. So if later tonight you have an, oh, I forgot to say, or wait, what's the answer to this? You can either contact our office, or on the last slide of the presentation is Ewan's cell phone number. So you can fire it up, blow them up there and give them all the insight that you have. Because yeah, he doesn't even live here, so he knows less than we do about how it's used and appreciated and valued by the community. He knows a lot more than we do about the water that moves through and what is underneath the level of the water and the substrate in the ground. So it's great to have Dowell's expertise helping us with this little bit of a challenging project. And just again, our timeline is that we will be rehashing with the partners that are helping to submit the funding proposal. We'll be convening with them next week. So encourage people, if they haven't filled out the survey, to please do so, or to contact us directly with comments so that we can incorporate those into our discussion. And then keep your fingers crossed that we'll be reaching out with funding in hand to be able to move forward with design and construction or maintenance of the structure. So I see nobody on the computer that has unmuted themselves, so I will assume that there is no additional comments at this time, but thanks again for coming and sharing your thoughts, and we'll stop the recording now. But if there's people that want to linger, oh, we got some other thoughts. This is great. So stand by.
Yeah, Chris here again. I just wanted to say that I guess I would like to see the boat passage be incorporated in this. It's just a heavy concern of mine. And also I've seen everything from young, 13, 14-year-old kids crossing the Weir to older, boaters and tourists and stuff. So it's used more than I think people realize. Then I also wanted to offer, if anybody wants to go for a ride up there and check the Weir out, I'd be more than happy to take anybody. So,
Awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, just to add what was Kate was saying, is I'm based in Anchorage, rather than Scotland. They haven't got me all this far over specially for this project, but I can design something that's very efficient, but whether it reflects what you want in the community is another thing altogether. So having your comments and contributions really mean a lot for this process, and I really appreciate you coming out tonight and listening online and filling out the survey. So whatever you would like to contribute, I would definitely be taken into account, and yeah, we'll listen and take it forward.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Yeah, no, this is people who care the most show up, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris, I didn't give you.